What if Order 66 caused Ahsoka to be sent back in time? Ahsoka stood on the bridge of the vendor, watching the stars burst past in hyperspace. It was quiet and calm, a nice feeling after the chaotic siege of Mandalore. However, her peace was broken through her connection to Anakin. She grabbed her head as his pain and confusion poured through their bond and as what felt like a duel carried out. When she reached out to Anakin though, he wasn't there anymore. The bond was still there, but Anakin was no longer on the other side. Ahsoka started towards the command center, towards where Rex had gone just moments earlier, but shockwaves in the Force hit her as she felt hundreds of Jedi getting killed. She began to stumble as she felt their deaths. Each step she took, even more Jedi were dying. By the time she finally reached the command center, the doors automatically sliding open for her. She could barely walk. It felt like she was losing control of her own body and her mind was muddled and going foggy. Upon seeing Rex, she started telling him what she felt with Anakin, but the words died in her throat as he turned toward her. His movements were rigid and his eyes were dilated, and there was tears sliding down his cheeks. His hands were shaking as he dropped his helmet, like it was just an afterthought. She moved towards him, but he whipped out his pistols as if he was facing a dangerous enemy. She was vaguely aware of the two other troopers who were standing guard raising their blasters towards her, but Rex told them no, that he would do it. So it called his name, but it only came out as a barely audible whisper. He urged, no begged her, to find him, to find Fives. Ahsoka barely heard him though. It was like she was in a dream and was rapidly losing control of her senses, body, and ultimately her consciousness. She tried to respond to him, but before she could, Rex started firing. She was so disconnected from her body at this point that she couldn't react and didn't feel the pain when Rex's shots hit her. She didn't feel anything besides the betrayal and fear. She felt her body fall, but that was the last sensation she knew before darkness encompassed her. In what felt like just a couple of heartbeats, she awoke with a jolt, panic and fear racing through her. She quickly reached out with the Force and repaired herself, but she didn't feel any threat or death. She didn't even feel the clones. She forced her racing heart and mind to calm and to take in her surroundings. Looking around, she realized that she was in a dorm room. Reaching out with the Force again, she felt Force sensitives all around her. She felt Plo Koon and, even though their connection appeared to be one-sided, Anakin. But his presence was a bit strange. Why was she here? What had just happened? She was sure that she felt the deaths of thousands of Jedi, including many she felt were alive right now. She was sure that Rex had killed her. She could feel her body start to shake as she brought her hands in front of her. It was that of a child's. Looking down her body, she realized that it was that of her younger self. Looking around the dorm room, she saw the familiar faces of her clanmates in Clawmouth's clan. Could it all have been a dream, or perhaps a Force vision? No, it couldn't have been. It was too vivid, too long, too painful. There was also that one-sided bond with Anakin, who she had not met till she was assigned as his Padawan. The only other option was that she had returned to the past. Her soul left her older body and went back to her younger one, back before everything had happened. A Jedi Master entering the room snapped her from her thoughts. He smiled at her, seeing how she was already awake, then went about waking the other younglings. It was funny. She didn't feel ready to join the Order lesson a day before, if you could even say it had been a new day. And now she was part of it again, and there was nothing she could do about it. She doubted they would let her leave with her still being a kid, and even if they did, she wasn't sure she could survive. She had barely survived before, and now no one on the outside knew who she was. However much she disliked it, she was a Jedi again. She would have to wait till she was older thinking about leaving, at least till she was old enough to take care of herself like last time. However, perhaps this was a chance to change everything. Looking at her fellow clanmates, she wondered what had happened to them, but as they started leaving the dorm room, she quickly put all those thoughts aside. There were still a few years before the war started, and even more before she was old enough to leave the Jedi Order, so there was plenty of time for her to think about everything later. For now, there was a day of class ahead of her, and she just hoped that she would be able to get through it, and be like her younger self enough not to attract attention. As she followed her clanmates, she was relieved that her mind and body were fully hers again, and functioned as they should, albeit younger and weaker. As the day passed painfully slow, Ahsoka should have realized from the beginning that she couldn't have succeeded in acting like her younger self. She had simply changed too much, been through too much. Thankfully though, no one said anything. They just cast glances at her, a mixture of worry, curiosity, and disdain. She was an outcast among her clanmates because she was not only gifted and energetic, but she openly expressed her emotions as well as her attachment to Plo Koon. They bullied her, but it was never too severe because of Plo Koon. They wanted to be on the good side of a member of the Jedi High Council and took advantage of the times he visited her. She was actually thankful that she hadn't seen him today, as he would immediately have known something was off, even though she still desperately wanted to confirm that he was alive and safe. Feeling his death through the Force had shook her, and she knew that she was going to have trouble sleeping because of it and all the other deaths. She just feared what he would say or do when he saw her. Ahsoka couldn't stop thinking about everything throughout the day either. It distracted and got her in trouble, though she was able to learn that it was years 3625 after the Treaty of Coruscant, or ATC, making her 8 years old right now. That night after the troubling day, as she lay in her bed, she let herself truly think about what had happened and what to do. She could just tell the High Council or Plo Koon about everything, but she didn't think that they would believe her or do anything. They were wary of prophecies, and what she said would likely sound like one, if they believed her at all, that is. Most of them wouldn't want to do anything. Instead, they mourned her and make sure she wouldn't tell anyone or wouldn't act on it. Not only that, but they had grown more suspicious of Chancellor Palpatine as the war went on. She wasn't sure why, but she knew that if they acted at this time, they would just tell him, as she was sure that they currently completely trusted him. They might just tell him regardless of whether they acted or not. She didn't know if this mattered, but she wasn't exactly sure what had happened, or who was involved, and she just wanted to be safe. There was not much she could do by herself either, especially as a youngling. Even when she was a Padawan, she wasn't privy to a lot of information or had access to all the records. Not only that, but the clones weren't known to the galaxy yet. Though if she remembered correctly, the battle droids had already been showcased as the battle on Naboo had already happened. Since she couldn't do much because of her age and rank now, to pass the time, she would just train. Both in the Force and in lightsaber combat, but primarily lightsaber combat. This was more so because she needed something to focus on and distract herself till she was assigned to become Anakin's Padawan again. Otherwise, she feared that she would just go crazy repeating her life as youngling and make a critical mistake. That and doing lightsaber forms had helped clear her mind before, and she desperately wanted her thoughts to stop racing. Ahsoka would also try to get any information she could, whether by visiting the library or talking to other Jedi. While she was at it, she would also train and practice for some of the things that would come, to better prepare herself and her young body to handle the war easier, as well as look at tactics used in previous wars and what she remembered from her 3 years of war. If she could command better, then many lives would be spared and many more battles could be won, and quicker at that. Starting this, whenever she had free time around her usual classes, and the training centers were empty, she would go train with a training saber as well as exercise, toning her body and ingrained the movement of lightsaber forms into her body. She tried to avoid everyone when she did this, wanting to avoid the questions and curious glances, or worse, the disdain and bullying from other younglings. So when there were others, she instead went to the library and looked through as much information as she was allowed. One evening, at times she found the training center to always be empty. While she was rigorously training and was focusing on improving her Form 3, form that she had previously paid no special attention to as it didn't suit her, she was stalled out of her focus by clapping. Ahsoka whirled around to find Battle Master Cin behind her, smiling kindly. He commented that he hadn't believed the reports that there was a youngling spending a lot of time in the training center, but here she was, and he was impressed with her dedication and determination. Ahsoka meekly thanked him, not wanting this to go anywhere, but Sindrala continued. He told her that he thought that she had immense potential and asked if she would like to receive training and guidance from him. Ahsoka almost immediately refused, but stopped herself, and forced herself to think for a moment. He was one of the best duelists in the Order. To be personally trained by him would be one of the best things that could happen, though there was a good chance it would draw people's attention. Still, she thought that the benefits outweighed the risks, so she hesitantly agreed. His smile broadened and he walked over and picked up a training saber from their place by the wall. Turning back to her, he asked if it was alright to start his lesson today. Ahsoka only nodded before it began. From that day forward, they met once a day, their meeting even excusing her from some of her tedious classes which she was relieved to be free from. He went through the 6 lightsaber forms with her, correcting her stance, giving her advice, as well as showing her exercises for her to do that would improve her stamina and strength. He went about showing her the moves of all lightsaber forms, wanting her to familiarize herself with them and be able to switch between them at a moment's notice. However, after a while, he told her there was only so much he could teach her with a training saber, so he requested that she participate in the next gathering, ahead of her class. Ahsoka didn't believe that it would be granted, as one's clans should be tight-knit as a family, and her getting her lightsaber before them would only harm their camaraderie, so she didn't think much of it. However, she was surprised when Sindralik brought the approval along with the fact that she would be joining said clan of older children. She had mixed feelings about this. On one hand, though they bullied her, her clan was like her family, though she was still fine to get away from them. However, the new clan which she was joining would likely bully her too, if not worse. She would also stick out more, and she realized that the risk she had taken to train Sindralik was even greater than she thought. But there was nothing she could do, as it was already too late to back out, and word had already spread. In the end, she was fine with this. She had previously been the top of her clan, and had been held back because of them, so being able to receive more advanced training was exciting and new, and she felt relieved that she didn't have to continue to try acting like her younger self anymore. Ahsoka first met her new clanmates when she boarded the shuttle that would take them to Ilum. Besides the curiosity and perhaps one individual that looked at her with disdain, they mostly ignored her, and she didn't bother trying to introduce herself or talk to them. During their trip, she sat in silence by herself while the others excitedly conversed among themselves, occasionally casting glances her way, hinting that they might be talking about her. They soon landed on Ilum and met Grandmaster Yoda outside the temple along with another Jedi Ahsoka didn't recognize. As they guided them inside, Ahsoka grew curious about what had happened to Yoda before she was sent back. She hadn't felt his death, and she didn't know what had happened to the Jedi Temple, so perhaps he had still been alive. Had the Jedi Order survived, or was his and the rest of the Jedi's deaths just delayed? Could she really change the future for the better if she tried? She stopped her train of thought there as she realized she was staring at Grandmaster Yoda. She wouldn't let herself question every choice. Even if the Jedi Order survived, she had felt too many Jedi die. This conflicted her. She wanted to stop the deaths of all those Jedi, but she also wanted to leave the Jedi. It was too closely tied to the Republic and cemented in their ways. Then and there, she resolved that she would do what she could to change the future before she left the Jedi Order. Forcing herself out of her thoughts, she noticed Grandmaster Yoda was now looking at her, his gaze a mix of wonder and puzzlement. No one else was looking at her though, so she couldn't have missed anything. In fact, they were getting ready to enter the caves to get their kyber crystals. He only looked away long enough to melt the ice block at the entrance, but as she entered the cave behind the others, she could feel his eyes on her again. Once in the cave, she quickly got separated from the other younglings, which was fine with her. They were supposed to go about this alone anyways, and this was her third time here. Her first time, she had to overcome her fear of strangers stemming from the imposter Jedi that had arrived at her village before Plo Koon, and had tried to take her. Her second time for the kyber crystal for the Shoto lightsaber, she had overcome her fear of losing the men in her command, and the insecurities she had about the war. Before she could wonder what it would be this time, so it came to an abrupt stop as the cave around her vanished. She was now standing in a plaza on what looked to be Coruscant. Ahead of her stood Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Plo Koon with Rex, Cody, and Wolf, who were all gazing upon the Jedi Temple in the distance. Looking down herself, she found that she was 17 again. Her death and going back in time couldn't have all been a dream. No, more accurately a nightmare. She didn't care and started running to the Jedi and clones, wanting to be with them again. However, before she could even cover half the distance, Rex, Cody, and Wolf slowly raised their blasters at their respective Jedi generals. She yelled at them, but they didn't seem to hear her as the troopers all started shooting, and Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Plo Koon fell to the ground. Shock and pain now forever etched on their faces. The Jedi Temple on the horizon started burning and screams echoed from it. Ahsoka stopped running towards them and started running the opposite direction as clones swarmed the plaza, all their blasters aimed at her with Rex being the foremost. He raised his pistols, and with his first shot, the rest of the clones started firing as well. Ahsoka blinked and found herself in a forest. Her confusion didn't last long, and she was more grateful for the trees that offered cover and protection from the clones as she continued to desperately evade them. As she continued to run as fast as she could though, each of the pounding steps behind her made her panic and her fear was beginning to overwhelm her. A cackling like she had never heard before soon echoed through the forest, followed by a heavy, mechanical breathing. She stumbled and fell, the sound overbearing for her, and she dragged herself behind a tree as the deaths of thousands of Jedi began hitting her again. Ahsoka was beginning to lose herself in the misery when Rex's words came to mind. He had told her to find fives, in an unsteady tone before they shot her. The memory of his face came a moment after, tears sliding down his cheek, eyes dilated like he was possessed, lip quivering. She remembered his helmet hitting the ground, the sound echoing in the deafening silence as his hands shook uncontrollably. Then he stilled immediately as he pulled his blaster. It was as if he's being controlled, being forced to do something he didn't want to do. Ahsoka dragged herself to her feet, using the tree for support. Peeking around the tree, she scanned the swarm of troopers that were hunting her, looking for the distinctive armor of Rex. All the clones before her wore plain white armor, and she couldn't see behind them as the clones were still taller than her. She slowly climbed up the tree and quietly moved through the branches from one tree to another, scanning the clones beneath along the way. A glimpse of blue made her stop as she crept closer to Rex. He had stopped moving, his helmeted face looking deep into the forest. She dropped to the ground behind him and carefully approached, but he still didn't move. Ahsoka reached him and gently turned him to face her. He moved easily like he was an empty shell, devoid of his own will. She reached up, slowly and carefully removing his helmet. Tears were sliding down his cheeks again, but as soon as his eyes met her, they focused. In a wavering tone, he apologized to her for killing her, for causing her pain, for breaking her trust instead of being there for her when she needed it. Ahsoka grabbed him and pulled him to a hug, letting him cry on her shoulder as her own silent tears fell on him. In a wavering voice, she reassured him, telling him that she now knew that it wasn't his fault or any of the clones, that she had partially held him responsible and feared him, but not anymore, and didn't blame any of them. They were her brothers, and she was their sister. Ahsoka could feel him start to fade, and she managed to whisper goodbye before he was completely gone, closing her eyes and sinking to her knees once his form vanished. When she opened them again, she was surrounded by darkness, but the daughter stood in front of her, her form emitting a soft but strong light. She told her that a lot of little things had come together to give her this chance, a chance to make things right. The daughter reached out her hand, grasping Ahsoka's, then firmly placed 2 kyber crystals in it before folding her fingers over them. She told her she had faith in her, before things went completely black. The next thing Ahsoka noticed was the fact that she was laying on the ground, her cheek resting against a cold stone. Gingerly sitting up, she remembered that she was in the crystal caves. Opening her hand, the 2 kyber crystals the daughter had given her shined softly. Her head was fuzzy, but she felt she had a new clarity. Wiping the tears that were sliding down her cheeks, she slowly summoned towards the entrance of the cave. By the time she reached it, the ice had already covered it again. She knew the warning they had told the younglings before they entered the cave, that if they didn't make out before the ice reforms, then they would be trapped. It was a lie. It was just ice, and what was ice to the Force? It was one fear that trapped them. Gently placing her hand on the ice, she showered a hole big enough for her to walk through. Coming out into the main hall of the temple, only Grand Master Yoda remained. The Jedi that accompanied them must have taken the other younglings back to the ship. Yoda looked up from his meditation as she approached and asked if she had gone what she had come here for. Ahsoka replied that she had, and was surprised to hear how shaky her voice was. Yoda continued, asking if she had overcome a fear, or perhaps learned something new. She simply nodded this time, to which Grandmaster Yoda got up and beckoned her to follow. He led her back to the ship where the other younglings were starting to build their lightsabers with Master Huyang. When she walked into the ship behind Yoda, they all looked at her in surprise. They still avoided her though as she went into an empty area to start building her lightsabers. All the necessary parts for a single lightsaber were already there waiting for her, so she bought time by arranging them. She didn't want to attract attention by appearing to know what she was doing, so she would wait till some of the others constructed theirs first. However, Huyang comes to her, having finished giving personal instructions to the rest of the younglings, it now being her turn. He comments that it's been a while since the youngling had brought 2 kyber crystals, and goes about quickly doubling the components in front of her, as well as adding a few accessories he thought would go well. When he finishes, and she still doesn't move, he correctly guesses that she doesn't want to draw attention and outshine the others. Huyang insists that she should not mind the others, that she should only focus on herself, for herself. Ahsoka hesitates and heeds him, though only after glancing over to make sure no one was watching. Wanting to get over with, she swiftly places the 2 kyber crystals in the center of the parts, closes her eyes and starts meditating. She skillfully but quickly arranges the parts of both lightsabers at once, wanting to finish as soon as possible before anyone got curious and looked over. The lightsabers were built with kyber crystals at its core, so she started with them, then started attaching parts and wires. A process that requires so much precision and skill that only a Force user could do it. Sokka quickly finished the 2 lightsabers at the same time and opened her eyes, letting her new lightsabers gently fall into her hands. They were different from her previous sabers. Instead of the typical lightsaber shape, they were thinner, slightly longer, though her shoulder was again shorter than her main one, and they had a slight curve. They resembled the sword handles of old, and both of them had 2 diamond shapes on either side. She was about to ignite them when she finally became aware of her surroundings again, and she realized that all eyes were in fact on her. Huying was the first to speak though, unfazed as ever, commenting that this was the first time he had seen lightsabers such as hers, that they were truly unique and one of a kind. This didn't help and only made Ahsoka want to hide more, as she was now for certain the center of attention, something she hadn't wanted to happen. A youngling her age shouldn't be with a class whose other students were 2 years older than her and participating in a gathering, nor should someone as young as her be able to build 2 lightsabers at once on their first try. She should have at least taken her time, slowly doing one at a time instead of rushing through it. It was foolish of her to believe that her actions wouldn't be noticed if she was just quick. Thankfully though, Huying seemed to understand and prompted to get the other younglings back on task, just as she was about to actually hide from their gazes. All they could hopefully do anyway was just spread rumors and bully her. This just left the eyes of Grandmaster Yoda and the other Jedi on her, though he went to the other younglings at the prompting of Yoda, who made his way to her. She couldn't help but grip her new lightsabers tightly and lower her head as he approached, embarrassed and ashamed that she was this foolish. When he reached her, he patted her hand, which was turning white around the lightsabers. He told her that this was nothing to be sad about, and said she should hold her head high, and be proud as he was proud of her and Plo Koon would soon be, and that it brought him joy that the future of the Jedi Order would have Jedi such as her. Once he finished, he left the room, and Ahsoka made herself comfortable in a corner and watched the other younglings build their lightsabers. She wanted to ignite her lightsabers, but forced herself to wait. She didn't want to be the center of attention again. She just hoped that she would at least make it back to Coruscant into their classes before she got herself into the spotlight once again.